It started with a $500 fine for my daughter's sidewalk chalk art. It escalated to our HOA president, a woman fueled by petty power, calling the police to have my wife arrested right on our front lawn. The officer arrived, stern and ready to enforce the Karen's will, citation in hand. But he stopped dead when he saw my wife's face. The paper slipped from his fingers as a look of pure shock, almost fear, washed over him. Our HOA president thought she was enforcing a rule. What she was really doing was ending her reign. She had just picked a fight with the one woman in the city you can't intimidate. 2 years ago, my wife Evelyn and I bought a house in the Oak Creek Estates subdivision for one reason: peace. We wanted the kind of quiet, suburban life you see in movies: manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, and a general sense of safety. For me, a graphic designer who works from home, it meant a quiet space to focus. For Evelyn, it was a sanctuary. Her job was incredibly high stress, demanding, and public. When she came home, she wanted to trade in her severe work suits for gardening gloves and simply be a mom to our 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Our house was our fortress of solitude, the one place the pressures of her world couldn't reach her. And for a while, it was perfect. Our neighbors were friendly enough, a mix of young families and retirees. We'd share a wave during the morning commute, or a brief chat while getting the mail. We weren't looking for a block party every weekend, we just wanted a respectful, quiet environment to raise our daughter. Lily was the heart of our home, a vibrant splash of color in our calm world. Her laughter filled the backyard, and her imagination knew no bounds. Her favorite canvas wasn't paper or a screen, but the wide, gray expanse of our own driveway. With a bucket of sidewalk chalk, she would create entire universes, swirling galaxies, rainbow castles, and lopsided, smiling dragons that guarded our front door. These chalk drawings were temporary, beautiful, and completely harmless. They were the first thing to greet Evelyn when she came home, and seeing them never failed to melt the tension from her shoulders. It was a sign she was home, a place of innocence and creativity. Most neighbors would smile at them. Some would even stop and tell Lily how much they loved her latest masterpiece. It was the epitome of the wholesome community life we had signed up for. But not everyone saw it that way. Every perfect neighborhood, we soon learned, has its shadow, and ours was named Brenda. Brenda was the HOA president, a woman who seemed to have retired from a life of, well, we didn't know, but it must have involved a lot of scowling and finger-wagging. She treated our quiet suburban loop like her personal fiefdom. We'd see her on her daily patrols, a clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning every home for infractions. A garbage can left out an hour too late, a patch of grass a quarter-inch too high, a non-approved garden gnome. No detail was too small for her tyrannical oversight. She never spoke to us directly in those early days. She was more of a silent, menacing presence, a storm cloud on the horizon of our sunny life. We'd see her car slow to a crawl as it passed our house, her gaze lingering just a little too long on Lily's colorful driveway art. We didn't think much of it at first. After all, who could have a problem with a child's harmless drawings? The first shot in Brenda's one-woman war wasn't a cannonball, but a piece of paper. It arrived folded neatly in our mailbox, a crisp, white envelope with the Oak Creek Estates HOA logo printed in an obnoxiously stately font. Inside, there was no friendly note, no neighborly request. It was a formal warning, cold and impersonal. It cited Bylaw 7.4 subsection C, regarding maintaining aesthetic uniformity, and prohibiting any exterior alterations or decorations, not pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee, a committee of one, which was, of course, Brenda herself. Our daughter's chalk drawings were classified as an unapproved decoration. The letter concluded with a sterile demand. The driveway was to be cleared of the offending art within 48 hours to avoid further action. Evelyn read it over my shoulder, a sigh escaping her lips. "Seriously?" she muttered. I was furious. This wasn't a broken fence or an overgrown lawn. This was a child's harmless expression. "We should fight this," I said, my voice tight. But Evelyn, ever the pragmatist, just wanted peace. Her life was filled with conflict from 9 to 5. The last thing she wanted was to bring it home. "Mark, let it go," she said gently. "It's supposed to rain this weekend. The problem will solve itself. It's not a hill worth dying on." I reluctantly agreed. We did nothing, and as predicted, a Saturday afternoon shower washed the smiling dragons and rainbow castles away, leaving behind a clean, compliant, and disappointingly gray driveway. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. The following Tuesday, the sun was out, and so was Lily with her bucket of chalk. She spent an hour creating a vibrant mural of our family as stick figures holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. It was adorable. The next morning, another envelope was in our mailbox. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a formal notice for a $100 fine. Tucked behind the letter were two glossy, high-resolution photos of our driveway, taken from the street. One was of the dragon mural from the previous week, and the other was of Lily's new family portrait. Both were time-stamped. The feeling of being watched, of our home being surveilled by this petty tyrant, sent a chill down my spine. That was it. The silent treatment was over. I saw Brenda on her afternoon patrol, clipboard in hand, and walked right up to her. I kept my tone level, explaining that the chalk was temporary and harmless. She didn't even look up from her notes. "Rules are rules," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "The bylaws are clear. If I make an exception for you, the next thing you know, someone will be painting their house purple. It's a slippery slope." I tried to reason with her, pointing out the absurdity of fining a child's art, but it was like talking to a brick wall. "Pay the fine, Mr. Henderson," she said, finally meeting my eyes with a cold, triumphant glint. "Or it will only get worse." I went home fuming, the interaction leaving a sour taste in my mouth. When I told Evelyn, I saw a subtle shift in her demeanor. The desire for peace was still there, but it was now competing with a deep, simmering anger. This wasn't just about chalk anymore, it was about harassment. That evening, she pulled up the official HOA covenant on her laptop. She scrolled through pages of dense legalese, her expression growing more focused with each paragraph. Finally, she stopped. "Here it is," she said, pointing to the screen. "Bylaw 7.4 is for permanent or semi-permanent additions, structures, and modifications. It lists things like sheds, fences, and satellite dishes." She looked at me. "Sidewalk chalk isn't a structure. It's not permanent. It's not even semi-permanent. It's just chalk. She's misinterpreting the covenant to suit her agenda." Armed with this, Evelyn's entire posture changed. She wasn't just a mom anymore. She was the sharp legal mind she was known for at work. She spent 20 minutes drafting a letter. It was a masterpiece of polite, professional, and utterly devastating logic. It quoted the bylaws back to the board, explained the legal definitions of permanent and structure, and respectfully stated that since the chalk did not fall under the purview of Bylaw 7.4, the fine was invalid. We would not be paying it, and we considered the matter closed. We sent it via email to the official HOA address, confident that our firm, logical response would put an end to Brenda's nonsense. We had used reason and the HOA's own rules against them. Surely, that would be enough. It was not enough. It was gasoline on a fire. Brenda took our letter not as a legal argument, but as a personal insult. Her campaign of harassment escalated. She started parking her car across the street from our house for hours at a time, just watching. She would take pictures whenever Lily went outside with her chalk. She posted anonymous rants in the community Facebook group about disrespectful residents who think the rules don't apply to them. Other neighbors, clearly afraid of being her next target, began to avoid us. The friendly waves stopped. We were being socially isolated. Then, the third letter came, delivered by certified mail, requiring a signature. My hands shook as I opened it. The original $100 fine was still there, plus a $200 late fee. Below that was a new charge, a $500 fine for continuous and willful violation of community covenants. Our total was now $800 for chalk. But that wasn't the worst part. The final paragraph was the real threat. It stated that if the full amount was not paid within 72 hours, the HOA would place a lien on our property. And then, the sentence that changed everything. Furthermore, continued non-compliance will be reported to local authorities for enforcement of community. A lien. Calling the police. Over a child's drawings. I felt a wave of helpless rage wash over me. This woman was threatening our home, our finances, and our safety. I looked at Evelyn, expecting to see panic. Instead, her face was a mask of absolute calm. It was a chilling, focused stillness I had never seen before in our home. She took the letter from my hands and read the final paragraph twice. The mom who just wanted to garden was gone. In her place was someone else, someone who understood power and how to dismantle it. She looked up from the page, her eyes locking onto mine, holding a cold, hard fire. "All right," she said, her voice even and dangerously quiet. "She wants to involve law enforcement? Fine. Let's involve law enforcement." The 72-hour deadline passed in a shroud of suffocating silence. We didn't pay the fine. Every time a car slowed down on our street, my stomach would clench. Lily, sensing the tension, played quietly inside, her chalk bucket sitting untouched by the back door. I was a nervous wreck, but Evelyn was the calm eye of the storm. She wasn't gardening or relaxing, she was preparing. She spent hours at her desk, the quiet clicks of her keyboard and the low murmur of her voice on the phone creating a strange sense of impending battle. She was gathering ammunition, and I knew her target was Brenda. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the spectacle that unfolded that Saturday morning. It began with the unmistakable sight of flashing blue and red lights painting our living room wall. I looked out the window, and my heart hammered against my ribs. A police cruiser was parked at the curb. Behind it, a second cruiser pulled up, a clear and deliberate show of force. This wasn't a casual visit. This was an intimidation tactic orchestrated by Brenda. And there she was, standing on the sidewalk across the street like a triumphant general watching her army advance. Her phone was held high, recording everything, a venomous, self-satisfied smirk plastered on her face. Curtains twitched in the houses up and down the street. This was exactly what she wanted, a public shaming, a definitive victory to cement her reign over the neighborhood. A tall, weary-looking officer, whom I'd later learned was Officer Miller, got out of the first car and walked up our driveway. His partner hung back, observing. Miller held a clipboard with what I assumed was Brenda's complaint. I met him at the door, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to calmly explain our side of the story. He was professional but distant, listening with a practiced indifference. "Sir, I'm not here to interpret your HOA rules," he said flatly. "We received a call about a disturbance and a refusal to comply with community regulations. We're just here to keep the peace." It was at that moment that Evelyn appeared behind me. She wasn't in her weekend jeans and t-shirt. She was wearing a pair of dark slacks and a sharply pressed navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked less like a resident and more like she was about to address a courtroom. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her, and simply stood there, her gaze fixed on Officer Miller. The change was instantaneous and astounding. Officer Miller, who had been looking at me with bored professionalism, now looked at my wife, and his entire posture shifted. His eyes widened slightly. The clipboard drooped in his hand. A wave of confusion, then dawning recognition, washed over his face. He blinked twice, as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Brenda, sensing a lull in her planned humiliation, shouted from across the street. "Officer, do your job! They are in violation! They need to be cited!" Officer Miller didn't even glance in her direction. His attention was completely locked on Evelyn. He swallowed, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "Judge Henderson?" he stammered, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Your Honor? I don't understand. What's going on here?" The two words, "Your Honor," hung in the air, more powerful than any siren. Brenda's jaw went slack. The smug smirk on her face dissolved into a mask of utter confusion. From across the street, she could only sputter. "Judge? What is he talking about?" Evelyn's voice, when she finally spoke, was calm, measured, and carried an authority that silenced everything else on the street. "Good morning, Officer Miller," she said, her tone even but edged with steel. "Thank you for responding. However, it seems you've been brought here under pretenses. This woman," she said, gesturing coolly towards a now frozen Brenda, "has been engaged in a months-long campaign of targeted harassment against my family. She has used the HOA as a weapon to surveil my 7-year-old daughter, issue fraudulent fines based on a willful misinterpretation of the community bylaws, and has now wasted valuable city resources to intimidate us." It was a masterclass in controlled fury. She then held out a slim portfolio folder she'd been carrying. "In here, you will find copies of her correspondence, the specific bylaws she is misapplying, and for your reference, the municipal codes that affirm the legality of our position and the illegality of hers. Specifically, the ordinances regarding harassment and the filing of false reports." Officer Miller took the folder like it was a sacred text. He flipped through it, his partner coming over to look. Their expressions shifted from confusion to a grim understanding. The partner walked back to his car and spoke quietly into his radio. Brenda, realizing her power was not just slipping but completely evaporating, lost all composure. She stormed across the lawn, her phone now forgotten. "This is ridiculous. She's one of them. A lawyer. She's abusing her power," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am the president of this association. I have the authority here." Officer Miller turned to face Brenda, and all the weariness was gone from his face, replaced by a cold, hard glare. "Ma'am, the only person abusing their authority here is you," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Filing a false police report is a serious offense. Wasting our time with a petty, personal vendetta when we could be responding to actual emergencies is something my captain takes very seriously. And harassing a private citizen, regardless of who they are, is against the law." He gestured to her phone. "We're going to need to see the evidence you've been collecting. We will also be taking your statement, as Judge Henderson is well within her rights to file a formal complaint against you. Right now." The tables hadn't just turned, they had been flipped over and set on fire. The public humiliation Brenda had planned was now hers, tenfold. The neighbors who had been watching her show were now watching her be interrogated by the police on our front lawn. Her face went from red with rage to pale with panic. She was speechless, cornered by the very authority she had tried to weaponize. The officers spent another 10 minutes taking statements. They apologized to Evelyn no less than 5 times, assuring her the incident would be fully documented. As they finally got back in their cars, the street fell silent. Brenda was left standing alone in the middle of the lawn, a pathetic, defeated figure. One by one, the neighbors' curtains slid shut. The show was over. We walked back inside, the adrenaline slowly beginning to fade. The immediate threat was gone. Lily came running to hug Evelyn, blissfully unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. I watched my wife, the fierce protector, instantly soften back into a mother. She looked out the window at Brenda, who was now stumbling back to her own house, her reign of terror shattered in a single, irreversible morning. She brought the full weight of her petty kingdom down on our family. She just never realized she was picking a fight with the woman who helps write the rules for the entire city. The moment our front door clicked shut, the silence in the house was deafening. The flashing lights were gone, the shouting was over, and the oppressive tension that had choked our home for weeks finally evaporated. It was like the air after a violent thunderstorm, clean, calm, and eerily still. Lily, who had been hiding in her room, came out and wrapped her arms around Evelyn's waist. In that instant, the formidable Judge Henderson, who had just dismantled a petty tyrant with cold, surgical precision, disappeared. She was just Mom again. She knelt, hugged Lily tightly, and whispered that everything was going to be okay. I stood there, watching the two of them, and felt a wave of profound admiration and relief wash over me. We had weathered the storm. The piece we had moved here for, which had been stolen from us, was finally ours again. But the fallout from Brenda's failed crusade was far from over. It was just beginning. The first ripples started on the community Facebook group that afternoon. Someone who had witnessed the entire confrontation posted a vague but telling status. "Well, the Saturday morning drama on Oak Street was something else. Pretty sure our HOA president just picked a fight with the wrong person." The post exploded. Within an hour, there were over 100 comments. People who had been too intimidated to speak up before suddenly found their courage. Stories that had been whispered in private were now being aired in public. There was the retired couple fined for having a bird feeder that wasn't on the approved list. There was a young mother cited because her toddler's plastic slide was visible from the street. Story after story painted a picture not of a diligent HOA president, but of a vindictive bully who got a thrill from making her neighbors miserable. Our chalk art incident wasn't an isolated event. It was simply the one that broke the dam. By Monday, the HOA board had been flooded with formal complaints. The other two board members, a quiet accountant and a retired schoolteacher who had clearly been steamrolled by Brenda for years, called for an emergency meeting. Brenda, stripped of her authority and facing a potential harassment charge, had no choice but to attend. We weren't there, but we heard about it from multiple neighbors afterward. It was a complete bloodbath. Residents packed the small community clubhouse, armed with printouts from the Facebook page and their own violation notices. When Brenda tried to defend her actions, citing the bylaws, she was met with scorn. People were no longer afraid of her. The illusion of her power had been shattered on our front lawn for everyone to see. The final blow came from the board itself. The accountant, armed with the evidence from our folder, which Officer Miller had passed on to the board, formally accused Brenda of acting outside the scope of her authority, misusing HOA funds for frivolous certified mail, and exposing the entire association to a potential lawsuit. The meeting ended with a unanimous vote of no confidence. Brenda was removed from her position as president, effective immediately. We heard she didn't even stay for the rest of the meeting. She simply stood up, her face pale and drawn, and walked out of the clubhouse without a word. In the weeks that followed, the change in the neighborhood was palpable. A new board was elected, one that promised transparency and common sense. They held a community-wide meeting where they went through the covenant, page by page, and struck out the ambiguous and petty rules Brenda had weaponized. The Architectural Review Committee was expanded to 3 people to prevent any single person from holding absolute power. The atmosphere shifted from one of fear and suspicion to one of genuine community. People started talking to each other again. Neighbors who had averted their eyes from us now stopped by to apologize, admitting they had been too scared of Brenda to offer their support. We held no grudges. We understood. Fear can make good people silent. And the chalk art? It became a symbol. One afternoon, a week after the meeting, Lily went outside with her bucket and drew a massive, vibrant phoenix on our driveway. The next day, the kids 2 houses down drew a sprawling spaceship. By the end of the week, nearly every driveway on our street was a canvas of colorful, temporary art. It was a quiet, beautiful rebellion. It was our neighborhood declaring that community wasn't about sterile uniformity. It was about the life and joy that happens within it. As for Brenda, her defeat was absolute. Humiliated and stripped of her power, she became a pariah. The patrols stopped. The menacing presence was gone. 6 months after the police were called to our home, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. We never saw her again. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught us a valuable lesson. We moved here seeking a quiet life, hoping to avoid conflict. But we learned that peace isn't always passive. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Brenda's mistake wasn't just underestimating my wife, it was underestimating our resolve to protect our family and our home. She believed her manufactured authority, and her binder of rules made her powerful. What she failed to understand is that true power doesn't come from a title or a petty bylaw. It comes from conviction, from justice, and from the quiet strength of a family that refuses to be bullied. She thought she was making an example out of us, but in the end, we made an example out of her. And every time I see my daughter outside, her hands and face smudged with every color of the rainbow, creating a new masterpiece on our driveway, I'm reminded of that. Our home is our sanctuary, but now we know that a sanctuary isn't just a place you hide in, it's a place you're willing to defend. So what about you? Have you ever had to stand up to a neighborhood tyrant who thought the rules were their personal weapon?